had a large amount of chaos resistance, had a moderate amount of intelligence. Every other stat on it was negative, but the overall package was good enough that I was happy to use that. So that was a budget item, and there's a number of items that are reflected pieces of jewelry that are budget friendly. I don't want to block those out. Now you could block out everyone that is using a mirrored weapon or a mirrored armor piece, and I did consider doing that, but the number of those is just too small to consider. And that's because people that are electing to use a mirror tier weapon or a mirror tier armor piece, they are almost certainly already wearing Mage Blood and have been for quite some time. Likewise, if their build wants Svalin, they're using Svalin. If their build wants Progenesis, they're using Progenesis, and so on and so forth. Now, if you get inspired by any of the builds that are here, and you happen to be watching this video when it's pretty new, I wanted to plug a player run event. This is not some sort of paid ad or anything of the sort. This is something I'm doing because I enjoy the event. This is BPL. It's a private league event that was originally set up by streamer This Is Badger. This Is Badger now works for Grinding Gear Games in audio design, and so he's passed the torch on to other people, but this is something that's going to be running the weekend after I post this video. BPL runs for 72 hours. I only recommend it if you can play a lot and also be present in Discord chat quite a lot during that 72-hour period. So I wouldn't recommend this if you work weekends. I also wouldn't recommend it if you work 9 to 5 and you've got children and the only time you really get to spend with your family is on the weekend. But if you're not in one of those situations, then BPL is a lot of fun. And I'll put a link down in the description below if you want to find out more about that event. Now, I want to quickly talk about one of the things that's had a big factor on what builds are considered good. And this is the reason that the build that has taken over as number 1, replacing the Slams build, has shot up so much. And this is Cartography Scarab of Risk. This Scarab was gigabuffed in 3.26. And it's been catapulted into a position where it adds more loot than anything else that you can do with your Scarab slots on maps, but at the same time, it's not one of the crazy rare Scarabs either. This Scarab in its new form would have been really good even before Tier 16.5 maps existed, but now that Tier 16.5 maps exist alongside Tier 17 maps, it's even better. So bumming these was starting to get popular at the time that I was writing and researching the Day 13 video, but it hadn't really impacted the meta so much. This is going to be the reason that you're going to see Forbidden Rite and Soul Sacrifice using the new Whispers of Infinity amulet at the top of the list now. Whereas on the Day 13 version, it was much lower down the list. Cartography Scarab of Risk farming is just that good. I also want to mention, while we're on the topic of unique items, and we'll come back to this right at the end, unique item use across the board was really low on Day 13. People were going for rares instead. This has turned a corner. This is no longer the case, and now we're starting to see a lot more unique items being used. Whispers of Infinity is the biggest breakout item. It's relatively common. It's the most common drop from one of the new Pinnacle bosses, but on top of that, it's not being used as a budget substitute, it's forever gear when it's being used. And you'll find, for instance, that Whispers of Infinity is actually more popular on players that have equipped Mage Blood than it is on players that haven't equipped Mage Blood. Now, there were 2 items that were made much more common in patch 3.26 with no fanfare: Crystallized Omniscience and Grace the Goddess. These are starting to tick up in use now that players have started to realise, oh yeah, these are pretty accessible now, whereas in the past, they were kind of crazy hard to get. Now, if you want to build around one of these items, you definitely can. Definitely consider it if you're interested in rolling with Alt. These items are not common, but Trade League is big enough that there's plenty of them in circulation, and the amount in circulation exceeds the amount of demand for them, so they're pretty cheap now. I'm also going to talk about Doriani mercenaries a bit in this video. What this means is that your mercenary is wearing the unique chest piece of Doriani's prototype.
Why am I getting hit every time?
As well as this, your mercenary is investing as much as possible into negative lightning resistance on gear, which can go as low as negative 200%.
Oh my god.
You can use this with or without the unique chest piece, the Admiral. Now, if you're using the Admiral, that has to be on your character, whereas your mercenary is wearing Doriani's prototype. The Admiral allows your cold fire damage to attack your enemy's lightning resistance instead, as long as the lightning resistance is lower. And in these sorts of circumstances, it will be. Note that with the Admiral, it is only going to apply for instant application for hit damage. It will not apply to damage over time. So let's have a look firstly at the Ascendancy split. Now, we're going to break this down a little bit. We're going to look at it for all builds. We're going to look at it for budget builds. We're going to look at it explicitly for non-budget builds. And then we're going to smash all 3 of those charts together into one. So here's what the Ascendancy split looks like when we consider all budgets, high and low. You'll see Trickster first, Chieftain, Occultist, Elementalist, Berserker, Necromancer, Slayer. It's quite a drop down to Slayer there. And then we have Deadeye, Hierophant, Inquisitor, Pathfinder, Ascendant, Juggernaut, and Champion, rounding out the average size slices. Then we have the small slices, Warden, Gladiator, Guardian, Saboteur. And then we have the tiny slice. Yep, 4 little Assassin. Assassin's actually not completely terrible, but it just tends to be the case.
Oh, give me a
not the
fucking
best at
break.
anything. And so people look at it and go, hey, I could play Inquisitor or Assassin for this. Inquisitor is 4% better, I'm going Inquisitor. Or they look at something and go, hey, I could play this as an Assassin or
His
Pathfinder.
dashback is
but
really
Pathfinder
annoying.
is 8% better, so I'm going Pathfinder instead. That's the situation with Assassin. It's not all that far behind, but it is definitely behind
Miss.
on pretty much everything.
So, hit
what
that.
happens when we look at the expensive setup? Ooh, gee, those Tricksters are looking a bit more common now, aren't they? Then we have Chieftain, Occultist, Elementalist, Berserker. Berserker here you'll see is a much smaller slice than it was before. And then a similar sort of pattern going down. What about when we only look at budget? And you'll see the Tricksters, they're in a smaller slice this time. Chieftains, much bigger. Occultist, Elementalist, Berserker, Necromancer, Slayer. Berserker again, doing really well on budget, but then once people get rich, they tend to respec out of it. So what about when we smush all 3 of these together? Now the innermost ring here, that is the budget builds. The expensive builds are on the outermost ring, and then all builds are in the middle. This should give you a bit of a visualization as to how popular each ascendancy is at a range of budgets. So, low budget, high budget, and whatever, considering every single player that is level 96 or above. So the biggest takeaway here is that Occultist is by far the biggest winner since the Day 13 meta video. The Whispers of Infinity, Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice...
Oh, give me a break.
...build of the league. That was just gaining traction back then, but it has absolutely shot up since. It's mostly the power charge stacking Occultist that is dealing instant application critical strike damage, but that is not the only way that you can play it. Trickster is concentration too, but I do want to caution you, Trickster is only surging forward amongst players that have got a lot of currency to throw into their build. I would not recommend Trickster unless you've already got Mage Blood and you've still got quite a bit of currency left over afterwards.
Sure, I guess you could say
Most of these gains are coming at Berserker's expense. So people started out the league with Berserker, they got bored with it, and then they re-rolled as something else.
Really? That's not what my experience is.
The Berserker Ascendancy is in freefall now. This doesn't...
Yo, fuck this shit, seriously.
It's probably still the single best Ascendancy in the game. They're going from level 1 up to 4 Void Stones, plus 5 Scarab slots,
Spin?
plus 120.
Hey, I read that and I got hit by it.
That Berserker is best to get you that far. Once you are that far, then it's not quite so hot anymore. Then you can start to move on to something else. The wealthier you are in League, the better Trickster gets. This is the one spot where I did dig a little bit into who is using mirrored weapons, who is using mirrored armor pieces.
What?
And amongst
You have
people,
no idea what you're talking about, Mr. Gog, seriously. That is not true.
Gear. And we're not counting jewelry here because jewelry can be something that comes from another source, like the in-map reflecting mist events. But if we're talking about real mirrored items that have probably been created through the use of a mirrored Philandra, Trickster is an absolute majority of all the characters that have got 2 or more pieces of mirrored gear on their character. Let me be clear about that. When I say absolute majority, I don't just mean a plurality. I don't just mean that it's the most common individual slice. I'm talking about it has...
Oh, this guy is hard.
Now the Elementalist buffs are substantial, and basically every single player that is playing Elementalist is using a Golem package. The Golem package got huge buffs. It is the case that the Elementalist took another...
I get why the guy thinks I'm delusional for running Trickster. You don't have to... It's not that, man. Oh, I don't know. I'm getting cocky now.
But the buffs that have been made to the Golem...
You guys don't understand. You guys don't
that overall it comes out ahead.
You guys do not understand how the fucking builds work.
Through the prism of skill use.
Oh,
Here,
man.
I'll mention the current meta share, but also what it was on day 13.
Jesus.
So you can have a
you
look
know
at the
what?
changes,
I
because
fucking...
quite often
I'm
very
tired of the
substantial.
machoism
In
that
a
goes
couple
on.
of cases, I'll also look at earlier snapshots as
So
well.
much
so
machoism
day 3 and
everywhere.
5. That's going to be when we're looking at the Berserker Slam build, because that will really tell a story as to how brightly that build burnt, and also how quickly it burnt itself out. I'm going to present these in the order of how successful they were back on day 13. So I haven't reordered them, and that's deliberate. You'll be able to reorder them yourself if you want. And then at the end of all the builds that had 3% or more of the meta back on day 13, we'll then go through the ones that have 3% or more now, but that weren't 3% back on day 13. So firstly, we have Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. This is the Berserker Slam build, and this is 7% of the meta, or 8% if you count all of the Slam builds. So the way that I can identify that you're playing a Slam build is because you've got Seismic Price in your build. This was 18% of the meta back on day 13. It was 28% of the meta on day 5. It was 29% of the meta on day 3. So it's kind of in freefall at the moment. There is a related Earthshatter build, that's the other popular Slam build. It's less popular by quite a bit than Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. But once you factor that in, you're looking at 8% of the current meta. Why is this so popular? It's popular because it had excellent guides. It's popular because it gets strong enough to take down non-Uber versions of Pinnacle bosses on really, really bad gear. Probably on worse gear than anything else that exists in the entirety of the league. It can also limp through tier 17, so we're not talking speed clearing tier 17s without reading the mods. We're talking get to the end of the tier 17 before the portals run out, and limp through tier 17s on pretty bad gear on this as well. But getting it to the point that it can crush tier 17s, that takes a lot more investment. Ultimately, it's a fairly polarizing playstyle, and that's one of the reasons I think that it's fallen off pretty hard since. Volcanic Fissure of Snaking has...
Yo, come on! That fucking move is so stupid! Holy... That's the most OP fucking combo. It's like this weird ass odd rhythm.
Is you can preload a bunch of them when you know the boss is going to spawn at a certain time. However, this is one of those builds that is not that popular to play, and also it does tend to fall off once you start transitioning away from limping through your first tier 17 of the league up to trying to do Giga Juice tier 16.5s or Giga Juice tier 17s. At that point, it can be made to work, but it's something that tends to require more than other builds do, and so lots of people are transitioning.
Please tell me I nailed it. Yeah, I did.
Second place early in the league was Righteous Fire. Now, this one is kind of tricky to categorize because there's actually a bit of overlap with Castle and Stun Chieftains. We'll come to that in a sec. Righteous Fire is now 6% of the meta. It was 7% back on day 13. This build is played more than its power level would indicate.
That move, that spin hit is really hard.
Play style. You charge into a pack of weak enemies, you burn them down a little bit, explode one of them, and then once that monster explodes, it ignites the tougher monsters that are around it. That explosion was dealing tremendous damage because it's the Chieftain Hinekora explosions, and then you propagate that throughout the pack, whether that be with traditional ignite proliferation mechanics.
I think you gotta stop him. During that attack, the sword, you swing your sword multiple times. And I think that's the most dangerous one. I got his shadow attack pretty easily.
Across the entire screen. The explosion sounds fantastic. That's another reason that I think this build is really popular, more so than its power level would indicate. This skill is probably the weakest boss killing skill that's on this list. But that doesn't really matter very much in the context of Trade League. You don't farm bosses multiple times very often. You do them once, then you move on, unless you've got a specialised character, in which case you trade for tokens from other people, and then you run those on repeat. In exchange for this manageable weakness of being bad against bosses, you're best build in the league and doing a lot of different mechanics. Expedition, Breach, Abyss, you're really, really good at all of these. And in a popular playstyle, great guides, and that's the popularity here.
What?
Now this can be played on non-Chieftain ascendancies, but Chieftain does tend to take the cake, and that's because of those Hinekora explosions. Now there are a number of people that will start Righteous Fire and then will later transition out of Righteous Fire into Cast When Stunned Chieftain builds. It's also worth noting that 1/3 of Righteous Fire builds are also using Cast When Stunned, Literally Detonate Dead, or Scavenging in their build. And that I would say is one of the things that categorises a Cast When Stunned Chieftain build. The line between the two is blurry. I'm calling you build a Righteous Fire build if it makes one of these.
Oh man, I didn't go.
Either you use a 5+ link Fire Trap and you use Righteous Fire at all in your build, or secondly, you have a 5+ link of Righteous Fire. If you meet either of those conditions, I'm calling you a Righteous Fire build and counting you here, but you might also end up getting counted in the Cast When Stunned Chieftain section. The next build, back on day 13, was Smite of Divine Judgment. This one has actually gone up in use since then. It's now being played by 6% of the player base, up from 4%. So this has mostly replaced the post-nerf Frostblades of Catabasis and Lightning Strike builds. It's the preeminent Slayer critical strike build. However, There is also a newer Trickster version of this. Trickster lacked damage on this skill last league, but it had incredible defenses. However, if you're dealing lightning damage, you know what the solution is to not dealing enough damage. It's a Doriani nerf. Smite of Divine Judgment Trickster alongside a Doriani nerf can do really, really scary damage, whilst also just being able to tank pretty much anything in the game. And next we have the Blink Arrow Mirror Arrow builds. Now, we're going to get into a section where we're going to be talking about minion builds here. Blink Arrow Mirror Arrow was 4% of the meta, and is now 2% of the meta. This uses Transfigured Blink Arrow and Transfigured Mirror Arrow gems, not really for the movement, but primarily for the minions they leave behind. It scales the damage of those minions. It's usually played on the Necromancer, but it can be played as a Guardian or a Pathfinder. Each of these scales their damage in quite different ways. Now this one's down quite a bit from day 13, but it's still quite a popular choice. However, in the day 13 video, I didn't cover Ray's Spectre builds. They didn't meet the 3% threshold. They didn't miss by all that much, but they weren't able to get over the line.
I didn't, huh?
Spectres have actually replaced
man, that timing's
the
raw.
preeminent minion build. There is also an Animate Guardian build as well. Now, the confusing thing here is that these three builds actually overlap quite a lot. So if you have a look, for instance, at the Blink Arrow Mirror Arrow builds, you'll see that actually fully something like 30 or 40% of them are also Spectre builds. And likewise, if you look at the Spectre builds, some significant percentage of them are also BAMA builds. So a whole lot of different setups there. So it's hard to specify whether certain builds are Barmer, or whether they're Animate Guardian, or whether they're a Spectre build. Ultimately though, all three of these are reasonable builds, and if you want to put them all together, then collectively they'd be something like 6% of the meta. Next up we have Kinetic Blast. This one has shot up. This was only 4% of the meta before, it's now 7%. Now this is played as a Warden or a Deadeye originally, but also as a Trickster quite recently. That's sort of taken off. This makes direct attacks with wands, no mines are involved. This is not like the Power Siphon mine builds of last league. Typically, this uses Sacred Wisp support. Earlier in the league, it was mostly using Trinity support.
Hang on.
Trinity support is mostly gone now. The reason for that is that Doriani nerfs are just simply stronger, and they strongly incentivize you to be dealing primarily lightning damage. Now that doesn't mean that
that was a hard. Oh, he could have killed me there.
It's still viable. It's still
Thank
being used by a bunch of people, but it's no longer something that is nearly
bitch.
being used. Grace to Goddess is popular on the Warden versions now. It's much more affordable than it's been in the
Give a
past.
shit.
So
Go.
if you are interested in rolling up on the Warden versions, then that's an option that you can go with. Or alternately, you can force it into a Deadeye, or you can force it into a Trickster setup as well. It's a good item all around, but it's something
That's
that seems
pretty
to be more
good.
popular on the Warden versions than anything
What?
else.
So you can just like be
Next we have the Custom Stone
invincible?
Chieftain.
That's pretty
This is
good.
up to 7% from 4% on a day 13.
What's this?
Now, it captures a lot of things that people like about the Righteous Fire Chieftain, but a more explosive package. Can become very tanky, can scale damage extremely high, but it is really bad when dealing with solo bosses where it can really, really struggle a lot. Some builds are actually double counted. They're going to be counted as a Righteous Fire build, also as a Custom Stone Chieftain. That's unfortunate, but it's not something where you can draw a clear line of demarcation without confusing the issue a bit. Next we have something that has completely fallen off the radar, Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing. This was 3%, so it did make it into the Day 13 video. I'm mentioning it here because it was in the Day 13 video, not because it deserves to be anymore. 0.9% play rate now. It's still very playable, but it's very much something people play early
more
on,
interesting now.
and
Thank
then
you.
once they've
Some
got their voice
underground
gains, they're like,
dungeons.
yep,
This
Poisonous
game
Concoction
needed it a
Bouncing,
bit. It was
you're
a bit too
retired.
much
I'm going to
overworld.
transition over into the build that I
Thank
actually
you.
want to
Something.
play.
What? Oh, these are
because
enemies down here.
you have done everything I
What?
need you to do.
What? Where do y'all
Next up
come
is
from?
Transparent
All of a sudden.
Anticipation. This is being played by 4% now, up from 3% back on day 13. It is a top tier boss killing skill, it's top tier in the Sanctum, and it has a few other things that it's really good at. This can be played on a lot of different ascendancies, and it's almost always played with critical strike setups. Now, 2 of the 62 absolute legends out there that are using the ultra rare Runegraft of the Angler, fair warning, this thing costs a good percentage of a mirror, they are playing Penance Brand of Dissipation as their primary skill. So it is definitely something that has some cool top-end toys as well, but for most people, it's viable without the Runegraft of the Angler, because chances are you will never see that thing. Cyclone is next. This is up to 5% from 3%, but really this is 4 builds smushed into one category. We have Cast when Channeling Cyclone, we have Cast on Critical Strike Cyclone, we have Cyclone Physical Damage using Shockwave support, and we have
Why
Cyclone
even bother fighting this
dealing
shit?
instant application damage that is
I want
not
to try
using
this game.
Shockwave
This game
support.
has very,
All
very
these are viable
low
builds, but they're all very
replayability.
different to each other. Anyway, the one that's shot up in popularity the most is the Cast on Critical Strike version. And many of these fall into two
please just leave me
categories here.
alone?
They are Cyclone builds, but they are also Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice builds. Here we have the new build of the league. This has replaced Volcanic Fissure of Snaking
This
as
is
the
the
top
boss.
skill
It's the boss,
that's
isn't
being
it?
used by high-level characters.
Alright, it's
It
the
has
boss.
absolutely exploded in popularity. Depending on the way you round it, it's either 9% or 10% of budget builds and 9 or 10% of all builds, and it's basically one of the top performers of the entire league. Central to this build is the new unique item, Whispers of Infinity. This is the common drop from one of the new Pinnacle bosses. So we're not talking about something that's hard to get here. This is something that has a slightly under 50% drop rate, and it allows this powerful spell to be used in conjunction with Chaos Inoculation to completely bypass its inherent drawbacks. The reason Whispers of Infinity does this is that Chaos Inoculation sets your maximum life to 1, which renders any life cost that is greater than 0 completely unable to be paid. However, Whispers of Infinity transfers that life cost into a different cost, one that your character is capable of paying, and that means that you can cast this skill. Whereas without Whispers of Infinity, you're not going to be able to cast a 6-link Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice on most builds at all. Now this is often played as a power charge stacking instant application damage like Cultist.
One stage or 2 stages? I bet there's 2-stage boss, right?
Coiling Whisper is another interesting item that's often used in this setup, but I want to caution you, if you're thinking of using Coiling Whisper on the build, make sure you research its mechanics extensively. Coiling Whisper may require to use a very specific gen level of X-Touch support in order to make it work well, so definitely look into that closely before committing to setting that up on your build. Baseline Smite pops up next, 3% on day 13, 3% on day 31. However, this is one where there has been some change in the types of builds that are using it. So there's expensive armor stacking champion versions that run Smite. They use Replica Dream Feather. They are phenomenally strong. These tend to cost a lot to get rolling. There are also cheaper Slayer versions. These are definitely much more accessible. So don't be fooled with the Replica Dream Feather versions. Just because the defining unique item of the build is really cheap, you are definitely going to need a Mage Blood to play this build. And Mage Blood is probably not going to be in the 5 most expensive items once you've got your build actually finished. After this, we have Molten Strike of the Zenith. This was only about 1% of the meta back in day 13. It's shot up to 3% now. Now this is another one of those cases where the defining item of the build is, if not quite budget, it's at least budget adjacent. Replica Oberon's Warpath costs about 8 to 10 divine at the time I'm recording this video. You look at that and you think,
come the fuck on.
I can afford that. Might have to save up a little bit, but I can definitely get that. But then you look at the rest of the package and you go, I cannot afford this build. This is a very, very, very budget unfriendly build, but it is also very, very strong. It tends to be played on the Juggernaut, and it's one of the most tough kill builds in the entire game. Now the supporting characters that make the build so expensive, typically you're going to want Nimbus, you're going to want Mage Blood, you're going to want expensive versions of Split Personality, you're going to want Progenesis, and at higher budgets you're going to want Emperor's Mastery as well, and at the very highest budgets, Sublime Vision and Original Sin. So, definitely not something that is a budget-friendly setup. Generally played as Juggernaut and pretty close to indestructible. And now I want to mention one honourable mention. This doesn't make the list on its own merits, it's only 1% of the meta now, and it was less on day 13. But Eviscerate Ignite as an Elementalist has been something that's a bunch of fun. It can play as Energy Blade, that tends to require a higher budget. It can play as Ephemeral Edge, which can start a little bit earlier. And I'm mentioning this just because it's something I've had a bit of fun with, not because it's a super high power level build. It is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with it, it is a good build, but it's not something that's completely broken or anything of the sort. If you're looking for something broken, go with something else. This is something that I've had a lot of fun with so far. The Golem package is amazing, and the Golems stay up a lot longer than I was expecting when I was investigating the new Elementalist. Finally, let's quickly mention some breakout uniques. We've already talked a lot about Whispers of Infinity. This item's incredible. Wine of the Prophet is next. This one is a high budget only item. I actually considered excluding this when I was going through the list of unique items that I wanted to exclude from builds. It's just that people tend to get Mage Blood first, then get Wine of the Prophet afterwards, and so there's a high correlation between people playing this class and who have already got themselves a Mage Blood. Anyway, this is a generic good stuff item. In the way that Headhunter gives you a lot of powerful buffs,
They
you
get
get a lot
out
of
of
power
that?
out of it, but you don't have much agency over what that power is. One, the profit is very similar. It's getting used a lot, it's really strong, and it's the rare item from one of the new pinnacle bosses. Relikesh's Impatience. The Frenzy Charge edition of this is phenomenal. The Endurance Charge version of it is popular as well. And the Power Charge version
That's a long
a bit
combo,
less
isn't
so
it?
because people are usually pretty confident they can get power charges on their build from some other source. Bound by Destiny is getting used a lot more than it was back on day 13, but it's not being used a huge amount. And I think a big part of that is the omens that allow you to guarantee chance an item into a unique. Those have become much more expensive since more people started using Bound by Destiny. Sublime Vision has gone up a lot in popularity over previous leagues. Some versions of it are very expensive, of course, but Sublime Vision is seeing more use than it has in the past. And the last one is a quiet achiever, the Dark Seer. This item is just really good. This item is seeing use on 5% of high-level builds, whereas it was 2 and 3% in Settlers and Freesia respectively.
He stopped the
This item's been
fucking
good since it was given an
lag.
update. It's just that the player base are starting to pay more attention to it now. Anyways, that's all I got for this update. We'll leave it there. May your Varlords have
Man, this lag, your shader lag's continuing? Oh, it's not shader lag anymore. What is he doing? I can't go through? Huh? Huh? This game is really... なんか面白くない。I don't know. It's not even a 7. I changed my mind. I feel a little bit ripped off, honestly. It's okay. It's just okay.